Welcome back to Just the News, No Noise. There are a lot of things that this new Republican Congress still needs to get to the bottom of. And when it comes to weaponized justice, there's no shortage of things the Biden administration and congressional Democrats may have acted inappropriately on. One of them, of course, was the old January 6th committee. And there is a new January 6th committee that's been formed to look into the potential misdeeds of the old one. So joining us now to talk about all of that is Congressman representing the great state of Georgia, as well as the chairman of this new January 6th subcommittee, Chairman Barry Loudermilk. Sir, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Amanda. John, it's good to be with you again. We're back in the saddle after a little hiatus. So
it's good to be back. Good to be back. And sir, you know, I think for a lot of folks, they look at the work of the first January 6th committee, and if there was a list of priorities on their committee database, it would have just one: get Trump. But I know that you have a much wider net, a much larger scope. Tell us what your priorities are going to be.
Well, we're going to pick up where we left off last time, which we were on a quest for documents that clearly were not preserved. I know that there's been a lot of questions and PolitiFacts out there of whether documents were deleted. I never accused anyone of deleting documents except for some videos that they pretty much admitted they had deleted, but clearly documents were missing. And, you know, we were able to recover a significant number of the documents that were not preserved by the original committee. So we're going to continue on that quest, because just from the documents that we were able to obtain during the last committee, were very revealing of the mission of the original Select Committee, Pelosi Select Committee, which was do whatever you need to do to lay the blame at Trump. Don't let facts get in the way. And in fact, that when facts did get in the way, they just decided, well, we'll move those documents out of the way and not preserve them. And so we were able to uncover there was a predetermined narrative. There's no question about it. And there was little to no investigation or reporting onto the actual security failures of the Capitol, which was their number one priority. But they just decided to ignore that. So we're going to be looking at that as well. Not just who was it that got into the Capitol, but how was an unarmed mob able to overcome U.S. Capitol Police, Metropolitan Police, and get access into what should be one of the most secured capitals or buildings in the nation?
Yeah, that's such an important question. And you did so much in the last Congress to really help us understand those failures. And yet we got a lot more to learn. One of the big questions that a lot of the folks I talk to, including retired FBI agents, have is why were so many paid informants in the crowd and what were they doing there that day? Can you give us an update on what you learned so far and what you hope to learn in the next phase of this investigation?
Well, one thing that we have learned, and this came on the tail end of the Biden administration when their Department of Justice admitted that they had many, I mean, more than 24 paid informants embedded in the crowd. And so my question is, you know, I'm not surprised. You know, our FBI does pay to have informants through different organizations, and their primary job is intelligence, you know, to provide information. But with that many paid informants being in the crowd, we want to know how many were in the crowd, how many were in the building. But I also want to know, were they paid to inform or instigate? I mean, that's a big question, because we did uncover information and video evidence of Metropolitan Police officers encouraging people to go into the Capitol. Right. That's very concerning. But of these informants, if they were paid to inform, what information did the FBI actually get from them? How did they not know that this was coming if they had that many paid informants? I believe they did know it was coming. And what information did they gather? What intelligence did the FBI have in the days leading up to January 6th? And what information did they pass along to the Capitol Police? Because, look, Chief Sund was caught flat-footed. Yeah. Even though he was trying to prepare, we know there was political involvement in his decisions. His request for National Guard backup that happened several times before January 6th was continually shut down until there were actually shots fired in the Capitol. But what intelligence did the FBI or Department of Homeland Security or the Pentagon or the CIA, all of these intelligence agencies, what intelligence did they have and what did they do with it?
Absolutely.
So important.
Sir, I know when most of us think about January 6th, we think about what happened there on the grounds outside of the Capitol and what happened inside the Capitol. But the pipe bombs, that's also a part of this as well. Are you going to be looking into that?
We're already looking into it. It always confused me is with all the FBI resources that were suddenly and almost immediately put on prosecuting anybody who happened to be around the Capitol. Look, there was violence done. I'm not denying that. But the number of people who charges were brought up against, or they were harassed or investigated by federal authorities so quickly. How was the FBI able to put that many resources on that? But yet, it doesn't seem that they did much of an investigation into the pipe bomb. And so we're now reaching out to the FBI. They are being very cooperative, looking for all information they had. Why was the investigation dropped? Why didn't it go any further? And, looking at some specifics, like when were the pipe bombs actually placed? Were they live? And how, if there was a live pipe bomb that, according to the FBI, did have some black powder on it, especially the one over at the Democrat headquarters. How was a Secret Service agent able to walk past it 5 times without his bomb-sniffing dog alerting on it? And then why were citizens, just allowed to walk within feet of the pipe bomb while it was supposedly still active? This is probably one of the most suspicious and disorganized things I have ever seen out of law enforcement. And I think American people need to know the answers to that.
Yeah. So you said that you want to know if anyone was there to instigate. Do you have a growing suspicion that maybe some of the people there that day were there to make the situation worse, not better?
We do have evidence that there were people that were instigating, such as a Metropolitan Police officer that was undercover in plain clothes. The question would be, when we get more evidence of people who are instigating that may be part of the government or may be in law enforcement, were they caught up in the moment, or did they have orders to do this? Was this pre-planned, or is it just something that somebody decided, it would be really good if we could catch some of these MAGA people rioting at the end of 2020, right? Not necessarily thinking they're going to get into the Capitol, but maybe, and this is, one theory we're working on, as we're working on several theories, was this just allowed to play out for political reasons? So we're researching the entire gambit. We're going to follow the facts and draw our conclusions from facts, not just from political expediency, because America has already been through that with the original Select Committee.
They sure were.
Mr. Chairman, we've had many conversations with you about the one-sided nature of that first January 6th committee. I imagine that's not going to be the case this time around. Tell us who all is going to be on that committee.
Well, I think we've got an A-team of people. We have Morgan Griffith, who was on the committee in the last Congress with me, an attorney out of Virginia. He's a great guy, very smart, knows the law very well, and he was invaluable to me in the last committee. He sat down and read through transcribed interviews that we were able to obtain from these different agencies. I mean, this is a committee where we weren't just relying on staff to do the work. We were locked in doing the work ourselves. We also have Troy Nehls, former law enforcement on the Judiciary Committee. He's even written a book about January 6th, so he brings a lot of knowledge in. Harriet Hageman from the great state of Wyoming is another attorney that's joining us. And then my good friend from Louisiana, Clay Higgins, also with law enforcement experience. And so all of them have a keen interest in getting to the truth, and they bring a whole lot to the table. And I'm really excited about this committee and what I believe we'll be able to get done.
Yeah, it's really exciting. Sir, we just lived through a rather heart-shaking time with the assassination of Charlie Kirk. You've written a book about all the times that prayer has played an important role in our national experience. Tell us about it and why you chose to write it.
Well, we're coming up on our 250th anniversary as a nation. And if we want to go another 250 years, we need to look back and see what preserved us for the original 250. And if you go and look, there is no doubt that God, through divine intervention, has played an important and incredible role in preserving our freedoms in our nation. Look, there's been numbers of books written written about the Revolutionary period, especially when George Washington, his first act as president was to declare a national day of thanksgiving and prayer, acknowledging all the great acts of divine providence that happened during the War for Independence. Benjamin Franklin mentioned it at the Constitutional Convention. It was just something everyone knew, but God is governed in the affairs of men, as Benjamin Franklin said, throughout our entire history, all the way up into the current time. In fact, I gave President Trump the first copy of the book just before it was released to the public. And I told him that this was a book about divine providence, and I knew he had experienced that, and he pointed his finger to his ear, and he said, Barry, if God hadn't told me to turn my head when I did that day in Pennsylvania, I wouldn't be here today. And so he acknowledges God's providence. And, you know, Charlie Kirk, that's what he talked about. And was God his hands upon this nation. And so I released this book July the 4th to reintroduce these concepts to the American people. And it's not written as a documentary. It's written in story form. So instead of just reading about Washington and Valley Forge, you're there in Valley Forge with George Washington. We got more than 10 years of research into these stories. They're very factual, based on all factual content, but these stories go from 1746 all the way up into the 20th century. And I think it's really important for Americans to understand their true heritage.
Absolutely. I can't wait to get my hands on that book. Chairman Barry Loudermilk.
They prayed. Yeah.
Yes, and then they prayed. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
All right. Thank you both.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great honor.
All right, everybody. Next, some new reporting for you on DEI in the military. How can we finally get rid of it? That's next.
Hey, folks, I knew we all have two ages, our actual age and our body's internal biological age. What I didn't know is I've likely lowered my biological age without even knowing it. Here's the thing. Because Americans eat so many processed foods and not enough fruits and veggies, many are 10 plus years older on the inside than their actual age, and that is a ticking time bomb. Major university study suggests how to slow aging and diffuse that biological time bombs. Participants slowed their aging by drinking Field of Greens. That's all. They didn't change their eating, drinking, or exercise, just took Field of Greens. Each fruit and vegetable in Field of Greens was doctor selected for specific health benefits: cell health, heart, lungs, kidney, metabolism, even healthy weight. I feel great knowing Field of Greens can slow how quickly I'm aging, and I encourage you to join me. Swap your untested fruit, vegetable, or green drink for Field of Greens while there's still time. Check out the university study and get 20% off when you use the promo code JUSTNEWS at fieldofgreens.com. That's fieldofgreens.com, promo code JUSTNEWS.